For as much of a Munsters fan as you are, Rob, you should listen to your boy Fred Gwynn. Sometimes, dead is better. What is up, everybody, and welcome to the final chapter of my Firefly trilogy review series and the final Rob Zombie film that I have left to review on this channel. If you're a fan of Rob Zombie, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan, but I have reviewed all of his other films, and I'll put a playlist up here that you can check, and also a playlist at the end of this video if you're curious on hearing a different perspective on all 8 of his films. And I'm also going to be ranking all 8 of Rob Zombie's films this Sunday alongside my buddy Rudy at Gen X Reviews and my buddy CP from Williscredia. You're going to get 3 very different takes on Rob Zombie's filmography, and we're all going to have a lot of fun with those 3 videos, so be sure to subscribe here and so you don't miss that this Sunday. Now, as far as 3 from Hell, this was the last film that I watched. I've been binging his movies for the past couple of days. This is the only one that I had not seen before. I had decided not to watch this in theaters. I think I was just busy that weekend, and then after hearing all of the Rob Zombie fans say that it was terrible, I just decided not to waste my time with it because it had zero chance of appealing to me. And, unfortunately, my first assumption was correct. But while a family of hellbilly psychos might not be an immediate threat to you, identity theft absolutely is. So before we talk about 3 from Hell, let's talk about the sponsor of today's video, Aura. In a time where most of us have large parts of our lives tied to online accounts and social media, cybersecurity and identity theft are bigger concerns than ever. In fact, identity theft is the fastest growing crime in America, with a new victim every 14 seconds. That's why I'm excited to partner with today's sponsor, Aura. Aura is identity theft protection, fraud monitoring, a VPN, password management, and antivirus software, all combined into one easy-to-use app. You might already have one of these services, but if you don't have all of them, it's kind of like locking your front door while leaving all of your windows open. The day that I activated my Aura account, Aura sent me over 50 notifications of one of my email addresses and old passwords showing up on the dark web, where criminals and hackers trade and sell people's personal information. Aura also gives you near real-time notifications on credit inquiries, like if somebody's trying to open up a loan or a credit card in your name. And if you've been watching me for a while by now, you're more than familiar with the benefits of a VPN service, like being able to safely browse the internet as well as change your digital location for streaming services. Protect your family and yourself from identity theft at aura.com/Cody Leach, and if you sign up right now, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial with my exclusive link, so you too can see how many times your personal information has shown up on the dark web. So sign up for Aura today and finally have peace of mind that you have a tight grip on the security of your online identity. And thank you, Aura, for sponsoring today's video. This is a movie that intrigued me whenever it was being marketed for one reason and one reason only, which is how in the hell is he going to resurrect these characters? Is the title 3 from Hell meaning they're literally spit back up from hell and there's going to be some kind of a supernatural thing going on, or what is he going to do? That question was really the only driving force that I had to actually participate into watching this movie and seeing this story unfold. And that's one of the worst parts of the movie, is the answer he decides to give you. But before I get ahead of myself, let's talk about the positives of this film, shall we? The third act, to me, was a very deliberate homage to Robert Rodriguez films. And as somebody who's a pretty big fan of Robert Rodriguez films, I appreciated that. I appreciated that deliberate homage, that inspiration that it brought to the third act of this film. Gave it a little bit of a different flavor than the other two, being that it's in Mexico and there's psycho luchadors running around. It's different. I would still say it's that classic empty homage that I see in a lot of Rob Zombie films, where it's not really necessarily anything new or unique or wildly different done with that inspiration. It's just like, oh, that looks cool, let me do that exact same thing. I appreciated the way that this movie opened. Like, the opening 5-7 minutes of it is all in documentary style, to where the three from Hell, the Firefly family, have survived somehow this gigantic shootout. I think they even say 1,000,000 to 1 odds. Yeah, no shit. So they've lived, and it's a documentary style kind of recap of what has happened in the movie 10 years that have passed since the events of The Devil's Rejects. And so you get interviews with Captain Spaulding and Baby and Otis, you get the public opinion, you get some interviews of like the prison wards and some of the cops, and all of that, as far as a stylistic visual opening to this movie, I appreciated.
Free the 3! Free the 3! Free the 3!
And now moving on to the negatives, and without saying too much to spoil my ranking on Sunday, this has a very good chance at being the bottom of the list. Now, I am fairly critical on a lot of Rob Zombie's films, but this is the first one that I genuinely think was just an absolute mistake from start to finish. Even if I don't appreciate what Rob Zombie's doing, or even if there's some things that are left to be desired, or some things that he does that doesn't necessarily appeal to me, I always feel like he's passionate about what he's doing, even if he knows that it's not going to appeal to everybody. I always feel like he makes the movie he wants to make, and he's doing everything that he wants to do. He's a passionate filmmaker, storyteller that just doesn't necessarily make films or tell stories that appeal to me. This movie honestly feels uninspired. It feels like he didn't necessarily want to do it or didn't have the best idea for it. And again, he might say differently if I asked him. Maybe there's interviews out there that prove what I'm saying wrong, or he's saying the opposite, but it genuinely feels like the studio tapped on the shoulder and went, 31 didn't really succeed all that much. How about we dust off the Firefly Family? That should be an easy cash grab for your fans, don't you think? And then Rob Zombie went, yeah! Even if Sid Haig was in good health, which, for those that don't know, he was in very bad health during the production of this film, and I think he actually died less than a week after this film was released. So he's got a very, very small part, one scene in this movie. Even if Sid Haig was able to be Captain Spaulding for the entirety of this film, I would still say that it was a very ill-advised idea. There's nothing that aggravates me more than a shitty sequel to a much better film that actually does something to make that movie worse, or does something to undo something that film did, like Alien 3 to Aliens. This is not nearly that situation, but that's the best example I can come up with. You have The Devil's Rejects, which I don't think is necessarily a classic, but it ends pretty fucking definitively, and it ends in a way that actually is somewhat poetic for that movie, and it's very effective for what that movie is going for. The fact that they went and undid that and made these characters survive after that closing reel of The Devil's Rejects actually makes The Devil's Rejects worse. And that is the worst possible thing that a sequel can do, is not only be inferior, but fuck with a better film. And the way that Rob Zombie decides to narratively make sense of why these characters are alive again and why they're here for a third film is one of the laziest and most uninspired things I've ever seen him do. I mean, all of the different speculation that I saw and heard about when this movie was being marketed is so much more interesting than the answer we actually got, which is just, they just survived. Thousands of fucking bullets probably just hailed at them. No possible chance in hell that even one of them could have survived. But fuck it, all three of them lived. Deal with it. And since I've already mentioned it, one of the biggest, if not the biggest issue that this movie has is that it has a giant Captain Spaulding-sized hole in its heart.
I'm your bozo Jesus hung out to dry for the sins of mankind. Oh, fuck. All hail the man behind the grease paint.
You have these three characters that have been the central characters for the most part since the first film, certainly were the central characters in the last film, and they're the ones we want to see again if they're going to return. And unfortunately, because of the health of Sid Haig, they have to write his character off in the opening act, and they transfer his role over to Richard Brake, who I'll talk a little bit more with, but is essentially just another version of Otis. And so it just loses a gigantic dynamic of these three characters when you don't have Captain Spaulding. And there's a bit of a repetitive craziness among the three now, where before I said there was a bit of a variety of craziness. Unfortunately, I'm back to beating that dead horse again, but I do not like Sheri Moon Zombie's performance as Baby in this film. And after she gave what I would say is arguably her best performance in Devil's Rejects. I don't know if it's her performance or her direction from Rob or the way the character was written, but they devolve her back into that crazy, wild, cartoonish character that she was in House of a Thousand Corpses that just grated on my fucking nerves. And they actually had the balls to try to make that like a part of her character development. Like her being in prison for 10 years has made her go psycho. I'm sorry, that bitch was crazy before the fucking gate shut. So it just made no sense to me why you would go that far to try to make her aggravating and over the top and ridiculous to the point where you're actually writing it into the movie as some excuse for character development. So she gets back to that crazy laugh. She's saying weird shit whenever she's in her little fucking meeting with the judge where she's going up for appeal. Her interaction with the other two characters, it's just, she's so over the top and so overacting that it's just, yet again, you look at it and you go, of course. Sherry Moon and Rob, together forever. 3 movies in, and as much as I do genuinely enjoy a good bit of The Devil's Rejects, I will still say that Rob has put almost no effort into actually developing these 3 characters. 3 movies in, and I still know jack shit about Baby, about Otis, and I'll at least let you off on Richard Brake's character since we only met him in this one film, but I don't even really know anything about him aside from the fact that he's Otis's half-brother and acts exactly fucking like him. So, again, we're going to start talking about the writing now. It's a Rob Zombie film, and you're listening to Cody talk about it, so you know that's going to come up. But the character development side, if you're going to bring them back, and it's been almost 15 fucking years, you would think that there is something narratively for these characters that justifies that. But no, it's just the uninspired, fan-pandering motivation of, that's my most popular characters, that's my most successful critically film, so let's try it again. Fuck it. And that classic tried and true Rob Zombie dialogue is here yet again. Just random, depraved, disgusting dialogue exchanges that do nothing to propel the story forward, that do nothing to flesh out these characters or their character relationships. It's just there because it's gotta be there. It's just a part of the fucking stew that Rob Zombie makes every single time that he turns the camera on. There's a whole scene between Richard Brake and Bill Moseley to where they're talking about fucking chicks in the ass, and the dog was watching, and why didn't you fuck the dog in the ass? And that would have been an interesting movie. And oh, by the way, let's make porn movies, and we'll call it Dirty Filthy Slut Productions, or whatever the fuck they call it. And it's just like, why do we keep needing to hear this shit? Like, what bells are going off in Rob Zombie's head when he's writing a script where he's like, you know what, there's a space here. Fucking chicks in the ass, bestiality, yeah, right, yeah. I try not to make assumptions about people, and in a time where people go way over the top as far as assuming people's motivations and assuming people's character, but Rob Zombie is one of those guys where I look at his writing and I look at the things that make their way into every single one of his movies, and I'm just like, dude, I love you. I respect the hell out of you. I love your music. I've seen you live a number of times. You're fucking awesome. I would be fascinated to sit down and have a conversation with you, but you're kind of fucked up. And to that point where the middle act of The Devil's Rejects, I said, was kind of meandering and pointless and just there to show rape and murder and torture, it kind of feels like this whole movie just exists for that, because there's not really anything narratively done with these characters that is interesting or hasn't been done before. You get one act where it's showing previously on the Firefly trilogy, and this is where they are now, and then you have a whole act that's about breaking Baby out of prison, and Otis and Richard Brake's character hanging out and raping chicks and killing people and skinning people and doing all that stuff, and then the third act where you just get a bunch of fucked up people against 3 fucked up people, and we'll see who survives. And so where I normally say that even if there is some narrative structure, there's some point, there's some interesting things going on amongst all this depravity and misery and torture and murder and sexual assault, I can at least get into those movies if I'm in a very weird specific mood that does not come around very often. This is a movie that doesn't have any of that shit. And so it's just like, when would you be in the mood to watch 3 from Hell again? Fucking never. Even the one aspect of this movie that could have been cool and stand out and a real prominent piece of this trilogy where it shows Baby being more or less abused in prison by Dee Wallace's character, and there's this weird like sexual tension between them, and eventually she traps her to get murdered or sexual assaulted or both by 2 other inmates, and Baby ends up disemboweling both of them. Even that sequence is shot and edited like shit to where you can't even enjoy it. It's just like shaky cam and weird angles, and so all you see is Baby's face and then shots of other shit, and then all of a sudden Dee Wallace walks in and she's holding a knife going, I won, bitch. So overall, guys, I hated this movie. As somebody that doesn't really care for Rob Zombie's style, his thing, whatever you want to call it, his template, this movie is possibly the worst of all of it, because it just doesn't even feel like Rob Zombie was here to play this time. It doesn't even feel like he was passionate about doing this film. It feels like he was shackled to it by a studio, which shackling Rob Zombie to studio execs, that's a recipe for fucking disaster, as evidenced in 3 from Hell. So I don't know of any Rob Zombie fans that love this movie, and I would not be able to recommend this to anybody that is not typically a Rob Zombie fan, because this is all of his worst elements in full display. Well, that's it for this one, guys. Be sure to check out Aura down in the video description, and if you enjoyed this, check out the rest of my Rob Zombie reviews. All 8 of them are in this playlist over here, and I'm also going to put my top 50 horror films up here at the top for you to check out as well. And be sure to like and share and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss my ranking tomorrow with Rudy from Gen X Reviews and CP from Willis Screedia. Thank you for watching as always, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.